Alright, folks. I made the decision to not go ahead and do the full-on demo. We're just going to not get far enough in it by the time I need to finish this recording. And we'll just go ahead and push it on to day 2 of Blueprints. Remember, Blueprints was supposed to be a 2-day element anyways. So there'll be some elements that I'm going to be covering next week as well. Let me go ahead and bring up my... where is my... I could swear I had the syllabus open and I couldn't find it for a sec. We're going to finish covering some stuff that we didn't get a chance to. So we did our overview, our context example, we talked about variables, we mentioned debugging. We didn't talk about printing, but we will in the future. I mentioned some loops, I mentioned some flow control. We'll talk more about flow control during the actual demo. I did mention custom events. I talked about the world, excuse me, not the world, but the level blueprint versus the standard object blueprints. Remember, I showed you guys how to make object blueprints a few weeks ago when we were talking about components. Did I actually? Let me double check that. Okay, I just checked and I did not. We'll talk about that a little bit more next week when we actually have an opportunity to make some elements that can become blueprints, especially when one talks about character blueprints, level blueprints, etc., etc. We still need to talk about inputs. I'm going to actually talk about that now before we get to it. I'm looking at, if you guys are wondering where I am at, let me go ahead and actually turn on my face cam here so you can see me. What's going on, guys? Let's see what else. We need to cover still... we've talked about BB classes before. We've talked about actor classes. We have talked about child blueprints before, but we're actually going to make some child blueprints later. I've already done an interactive door for you using physics, but I can go ahead and showcase that as well. We're going to be doing a pickup and collecting game, which I already have a starting file for you guys, but I don't want to force you guys to have to figure out some of the elements for it. I want to do a demo for it. I'm going to build it out for you, and your homework is going to be that you build your own version of it. And if you want to add a little bit more stuff, there'll be another extra credit opportunity. Most of you guys don't need extra credit, but what the hell, right? And then, of course, that's we're going to do line traces. I'm going to show you guys how to do climbing. I'm not going to introduce the animations, but I'm going to show you guys how to do a chest cast. So when you stick to something, your character can scramble up it depending on how much climb they have. And then we can go ahead and set those numbers and set them as variables and whatnot. And that's going to go ahead and wrap up our blueprints next week. So let's go ahead and talk about some things this week. One of the things that I didn't, or rather neglected to mention, for example, is we can go ahead and set these things called keyboard events. Keyboard events are relegated to creating, say, for example, if we were going to use a crouch, we could set this up to make the character scrunch down and trigger off their crouch animation, etc., etc. Let me tell you, that's not a good idea. Why isn't it a good idea? When we are coding elements inside of the level blueprint, or even coding elements inside, say, a character blueprint, right? So let's say I made a character blueprint. Let's go up to here, content, new folder, blueprints, and I made a new character blueprint. New character, BP test, and then we have an event graph, and let's say, see, when this character presses K, he automatically kills someone, right? Well, no. Does everybody see how we've hard-coded this button into the actual blueprint file? Into this particular character. Now, riddle be this. What happens if the character wants to remap their keys? What happens then? You're right, that's where it gets messed up. One of the things we're keeping in mind is understanding how hard coding and where to code certain elements becomes critical to making sure that our character is able to operate within the confines of what we are actually able to get them to do. Hard coding buttons for events is generally not a good idea. And next week, what we're going to talk about is this lovely window over here. We're going to be talking about input and action mappings. Input and action mappings is actually how you set up a controller. And if you were in my intermediate class, your current project is set on using a controller to make a game. But because most of the students right now are in the intro class and you guys are my intro class, we're going to talk about this a little bit more as we go. We're not going to be requiring a controller, although I will probably show how to hook it up so that everybody will, if you have a controller, you can go ahead and play the game that you're going to be making. Bear in mind, there's a little art and there's just a few assets. It's literally just going to be like a little pin walking around picking things up. That's totally fine. That's okay. That's not that big a deal. But it is still important to understand that using input mappings at the engine level, meaning setting those buttons up at the input level, is what sets up the engine for what you want to accomplish in terms of making sure that if the character remaps their buttons to whatever function that they want, those events are updated. For example, if we have an action mapping, let's go ahead and add an action mapping. We're going to call this kill all, right? Oh, we don't want the guy in there. And then we'll bind this to, say, I don't know, we'll bind this to whatever key press that we want. So we'll do a, let's see, do I want to bind it to a keyboard? We'll do it on enter. It kills everyone on enter. The nice thing about that is if any remapping happens, we can remap it at the top level up here. So that's already coded. We don't actually have to save that. We can get our action mapping from here. And I'll actually put it in the wrong project here. So let me go ahead and grab this and file, edit, Google Project Settings. We'll go into input. We'll add an action mapping. We're going to call this kill all. I'll leave a space in there. And then this will be on the enter key. Cool. And then once we actually get to our character, if we make our character, let's go ahead and make sure I'm in the correct project here. I'm getting somewhat fouled up here. Let's close this window here. Close that window. Okay. Okay, so we have our action event here. So now this can be remapped at the top level without having to go in and change all of the keyboard mappings, right? So if we mapped every button, every switch, every button press inside of the either level blueprint or the character blueprint, does everybody see how that can turn into a massive problem if anything happens that requires us to change one character? Or even if we make child classes of that character, we still have to go in and rebind all of the buttons, right? This allows us to say, oh, well, it's no longer going to be enter, whatever that key is. We set it to enter, right? Well, now it's just a function called, or rather an event called kill all, and we can remap whatever button we want on it at the very top. This is better than, say, mapping an event, a custom event, like so, based on a key press, right? Which in this particular case would be the button C would be used to kill all, so we can, and then we would say destroy actor or whatever the hell it is, and whatever our target's supposed to be, destroy actor self. Reference to self, right? Well, if we change that, we would have to go in here and say we no longer want it on C, we wanted it on a different key. We would have to remove that key and then add it manually. But it's so much easier to change this element when we are changing it at the project level by changing our inputs. We'll learn more about this next week. So I'm going to go ahead and do an outro here in this particular video so that everybody kind of is on the same page. I'm not going to assign any homework this week. I think you guys have had enough of, for how many people messaged me this week with pure panic, I think you guys have had enough of midterms. I'm giving you guys a week off, but I still hope that you watch these videos all the way through. These will help you understand the elements of blueprints that will set us up to do some more fancy stuff next week. We'll do our demo next week. I've got a couple of demos that are set up that I think are going to be fun. We'll do some raycasting. We'll do some blueprint assets. We'll create some elements. We'll do some elements of, like, say, spawning random tiles and whatnot. Yeah, I think there's some fun stuff that I've got planned that I think you guys will enjoy. And we'll make some kind of basic gameplay mechanics like climbing, maybe a jetpack. Maybe we'll do some other fun things. I haven't really decided what we're going to do to make sure that we can do. Maybe we'll do like an interactive door, or a door that opens only when you have like a key that reads that relationship. So if you go pick up the key, you pick up the object gets bound to the character, and then you can open the door once the key is set up. So we'll have to set that up and whatnot, as well as doing like climbing. So I've got some demos next week, one of which will be your homework, and the rest is just going to be for demos, and that's going to wrap up blueprints for these 2 weeks, right? And then after that, we're going to get into landscapes. We're going to talk about skeletal meshes. We're going to get into some audio stuff very briefly. We're going to talk about team working and pipelines. That'll be kind of like a flat week where everybody has an opportunity to get a little bit of a breath, and then I'll teach you guys about version control, what Git is, what burn down, what Scrum is. We'll talk about sequencer in week 13. We'll talk about UMG, which is the UI. It's just some basic stuff for UI. I don't want to spend too much time getting into it. At that point, it's going to be week 14, and people are going to be basically almost wound down. We'll talk about visual effects in Niagara in week 15, and by week 16, I'll make a video about talking about how you publish and self-publish and like do your builds and whatnot, and how you build executables and how you test your games, and then that'll be it for this particular class. So we're a little over halfway through. We still got some fun stuff that's kind of put together. I think everybody's really going to enjoy the landscape stuff. I think people are going to enjoy the demos that we have for blueprinting next week. I think there's a lot of stuff here to still enjoy, but I'm going to go ahead and cut it off here in order to prevent this from going too heinously long, right? Let me go ahead and brighten this up a little bit so I can actually see what's going on. Where's my... There it is. There, that's probably a little brighter. Alright, guys. So, that's going to do it for your preliminary intro to blueprints. I would recommend that you guys go back into the videos and try to replicate some of my results. Try to understand how to use the blueprint section. Try to understand where you're looking, how to open graphs, how to edit the graphs. Some of you guys, at least 3 of you I know for a fact, are familiar enough to where it shouldn't be a problem. You guys probably don't even really need to worry about it. The rest of y'all, however, probably should take some time to figure out and get comfortable with blueprints. Watch my demo, watch the basics, watch as I talk my way through all those elements. Watch as I show you guys how to reference elements, how to modify the blueprint from the level, understand the difference between level blueprints and why we have, say, actor blueprints versus level blueprints. I already showed you guys in the content examples what the difference is between an actor blueprint and a level blueprint. We'll worry more about making them next week when we're actually doing our test and we're building out a couple of games and getting some results from those games, so I think that'll be more fun. And yeah, I think that'll be it for this week. That should be about 3-ish hours for you guys, plus the recordings and whatnot. So we'll go ahead and call that good for now. Alright, guys. Thank you guys for your time as always. I know this class seemed a little bit kind of empty this week, I guess. Oh, I'm not even going to say it was empty. This is a lot of information. But again, I have to kind of lecture on these things in order to kind of explain them before we actually get to practical application. And I don't want you guys to sit here for like 5-6 hours to watch my demo and then get started on my get started on your homework. I'm going to go ahead and break it off this week and then bring it into next week. I had intended this to be a 2-week thing, so this is right on schedule. And yeah, we'll go ahead and go with that. Thank you guys for your time. I hope you guys get some value out of this week. At the very least, so you get some preliminary understanding of how Blueprints works and how you can utilize them to start thinking about how you can frame your gameplay examples. And then next week, we'll actually build a couple of very simple games, and then we'll go from there. All right? Thank you guys for your time this week. And if you drive, drive safe. And if you don't drive, walk safe. And if you fly, fly safe. Take care of yourselves and each other. Be good.